Hello, Steve Selbst here. I'm the CEO and co-owner of HealthSense Inc. And I'm very pleased today to be able to share with you a demonstration of our RevolutionSoftware web service. We have a module on this same page on our website which demonstrates the value proposition about the product. So I encourage you to check out healthsense.com. That's www.healthsense, like up here, .com, and learn more about the product before you observe the demo, so you have a little bit of a background and grounding in the value of the product. Now, having said that, in this module, we're going to plow in directly to the actual demonstration. And I will be using a real user ID and setup that I have in place for the purpose of demonstrating the product. So what we do is we simply log in, and the product you'll see has just a few options on the left side. There's business profile option, which is basically where you can add payers and update your registration, your specialties, and the like. There is a data entry section, and you will observe a couple of rectangles and squares inside of squares and rectangles. For instance, this kind of bluish gray Charge Master section, you'll notice, has a section to click and edit ASC data as well as physician data. So there's really just one single Charge Master per practice or ASC. And if you have both, then you can certainly utilize the capability of the tooling to assess both facility and ASC fee schedules as well as physician fee schedules. Similarly, down at the bottom, this square essentially has the same kind of capability where you list your payers for both ASCs as well as for physician practices. So fundamentally, we're going to go down the path of the physician practice today for the purpose of illustration, but just know that exactly the same functionality that you're going to observe today is available for ASCs as well. So relative to data entry, what you want to do is essentially import your Charge Master and get your payer files, one or more payer files, imported. We recommend that you do import at least 2 payer files so that you can compare and benchmark your payers relative to one another, as well as take advantage of the benchmarks that we're going to observe in the tooling. So there's data entry, and then there's reporting, and then there's business models. Those are really the 3 functions of the product, and really, in a way, you can distill this into get your data into the tool and then get your data out of the tool. And the reports and business models are really just variants of basic reports and advanced reports. So without further ado, let's take a look at how we get data into the tooling. We'll click on physician data. And basically what you do is you upload a file that contains your CPT codes, your modifiers, and that would be if you have any specific modifiers such as TC and 026 modifiers that are applicable to radiology services, you would be able to import those kinds of codes. And by the way, that's a new function that we just added to the tooling. The descriptions come along for the ride after you do an import, because we also license from the AMA, their CPT codes database. So any code that you load into the tooling in any of the reports, as well as the input panels such as this one, will display the descriptions, the bill charges, the locations, and then a function where you can delete. If you goof and you want to delete everything, you can, but be careful. If you delete everything in a Charge Master, then everything else goes away, including your payer files. So typically it's a good idea, if you make a mistake, to just deal with the deletion of a single code. But anyhow, the neat thing about the tooling is you can click on any field, like I just did on bill charges, and sort ASCEND, DSEND, whatever you like. Usually it's a good idea when you load information to do a validation by CPT code to make sure that all the codes that you intend to load are there and correct. And if you just need to make a minor modification, let's say on code 84403, I can click on that code, make any change to the bill charge, the modifier, location, and click update, and it's as simple as that. Now, what does this file look like when you upload it? Well, a neat way that we can figure out what the file looks like is we can save the one that's actually uploaded back out of the tool and keep a copy of it. So for this purpose, I'm just opening the file so that you can see it, and you can see it's a very simple file. It's nothing more than your CPT codes, your bill charges, and the site of service. And by the way, the ASC scenario would be your CPT code and your bill charge. You don't need a site of service, since the ASC fee schedule just has a single set of fees by code. And that's basically it. And we recommend that you simply upload those codes that drive about 80% of the revenue into your practice, so that you don't go crazy trying to load 400 different codes when 30 or 40 of them are likely to drive most of the revenue in your practice. So that's the file that you would be uploading. And in this case, I can just save the file back out to disk so that you can take a look at it and see how it would load into the tooling. But basically all it is you would go to the file upload function, you would first click the browse function, then go to the desktop and find the appropriate file on your desktop, and then you would click the file and upload it. I'm not going to do that here since we've already uploaded the charge master. There's no reason to upload it twice, but that's the way you go about uploading it. And you can see there's very minimal data entry required to do that. Most billing systems will allow you to save a CSV or Excel format and create this file. So that's the extent of how you go about doing the uploading. Same kind of situation relative to the payer files. And you can see here that I've loaded actually 6 different payer files, but you'll notice I have one called Payer 1 Offer, for example, and that's a way in which you can actually load offers that you may get back from payers during a negotiation and compare them back to the original payer file which represents the fee schedule that you currently have in place. As far as what the fee schedule looks like, you have preferably the best practice would be load up the same codes that are in the charge master, and you don't have to load up all the codes if you don't choose to. You can load up a subset, but the business rules and the tooling essentially prevent you from loading up codes into a payer file that don't exist in the charge master. The charge master needs to represent the superset of codes. Again, the modifiers, descriptions come along for the ride. You've already loaded the bill charges and the site of service, the procedures performed annually, so this is a count of frequency performed, and then the contracted rates. So there's a file much like the other one that you saw that just has the codes, the site of service, the frequency performed, and the contracted rates, and that's it, just those 4 data points. And again, if you need to, let's say, update your office visit 99213 rate, you can go here and change $65 to $75 and update it, and voila, everything's good. Your 99213 now is updated to $75, but I'm going to change it back to $65 so that we can preserve the scenario that we're about to look at. So that's data entry. That's pretty much all there is to it. Then the fun part starts. How do I get information out of this tooling? It's going to help me maximize reimbursement of my commercial payer agreements. So we have designed basically 2 fundamental reports, which we call the benchmark report and the payer comparison report. We also have 2 business models, an out-of-network modeler and a bill charges modeler. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of each of those 4 functions. First, for the basic benchmark report. What we're going to do is pick Physician Report 1, and you can see it's a fairly speedy deal. What you get is a table at the top that contains all of your codes, the descriptions, modifiers if you have any. For simplicity, I've gone with global modifiers. That's why they're blank. Blank means global. The site of service, the volume or frequency that the code is performed, and again, this is for the specific payer. This is not practice volume. Your bill charge. The practice charge, which would be just a measure of the bill charge times the volume. The Medicare payment, which is the local Medicare contracted rate in your Medicare locality. The payer rate at 100%, including any co-insurance and co-payments. Then your percent Medicare, which is the division of the payer contracted rate by the division of the Medicare rate in the denominator. And then you get your percent Medicare. The revenue, which is a function of the frequency or volume times the payer rate. And then you get some items here in the blue section, which are very cool, which gives you a regional average dollars, which tells you for that particular code in this particular locality, the regional average dollars are a bit higher than what you were obtaining from this particular payer for this particular code. And then you have the percentages, and we normalize percentages since once you get outside of your region, you need to be looking at percentages because of wage indexing that occurs in different geographies throughout the country. So you have a regional percent Medicare, a state, and a national, and of course region is a subset of state, which is a subset of national. Now what we can do here is we can actually click. Again, the paradigm in the tooling is you don't have to save things out in spreadsheets, although you're certainly welcome to, and I'll show you how to do that. And you can just work right in the functionality of the web service or browser. And so in this case, what we have is a descend sort, which brings the codes that are most important to the top. And one of the reasons I like to do that on a benchmark report is you get the codes that are contributing most of your revenue up top. And you can also do a quick scan to determine which codes may be under reimbursed relative to benchmarks. For example, payer average percent Medicare on your most important revenue producing code, which is an IMRT 77418 in this case, is basically reimbursed at about 105% of Medicare versus regional, state, and national benchmarks, which are much higher. So this would be a code that would certainly be a candidate for, if you needed to carve out, to target for substantially higher reimbursement. And the same would be true of the 99214 office visit and so on. So you kind of go through this and try to detect patterns. Now, another thing that you can do after you do that kind of a sort is go back to your procedure and do a sort. And again, now codes are going to fall into groupings. For example, go down to the bottom. You take a look at your office visit grouping, and what you're going to see down here is that your office visit codes are substantially under reimbursed relative to benchmarks. And that's really what you want to do, is kind of look at code ranges, code groupings, descending order sorts on revenue, and really get to the crux of the matter of which parts of your fee schedule are under reimbursed. And then we built for you down here a summary table which has some interesting information, some of which may not immediately meet the eye, that can be quite useful. For example, your payer average percent Medicare is 150%, but your weighted average percent is only 119%. Why is this important? Well, the way we go about calculating weighted averages is we, in short, are taking into account the effective average, the real average, based on the workflow through your practice. What does this mean, and how do we calculate it? What we do is we take the sum of each CPT code's contracted rates multiplied by the volume, sum them all up, that becomes a numerator, and then we take the sum of the CPT code's Medicare rates times volumes for each of the codes, sum it up, make that the denominator, and voila, we get a weighted average, which is an effective average of what you're really getting based on the workflow. For instance, if we did a regular average, we would be counting, if we go back to our descend sort, we'd be counting 77418 one time based on its average of 104% of Medicare, and we'd also be counting code 97032 one time based on its average percent Medicare, and yet it's only $1,000 of revenue compared to $272,000. So we don't want to weight these codes with equal importance. We want the full effect of the revenue production of the code reflected in the average, and that's what the weighted average does. So it's a very important calculation, and you will find substantial differences when you dissect payer fee schedules in this fashion. You'll find that weighted averages tend to vary considerably from averages, as they do here. So you should really be negotiating off of your weighted average reimbursement, not off of your average reimbursement. That is the punchline. And then we have some data down below. If a code is missing either Medicare rates or contracted rates, we call them out here because we don't want you to lose the revenue in the agreement, and so it's called out separately, then added back. And then also statistical data points, which is really the number of counts of particular outcomes in your Medicare locality or region, state, and U.S. So each code has a count, and you can see that certain codes have much higher counts, particularly if you get to a national level. For example, 99213, we have over 1,000 occurrences or instances of that code at a national level. Now, the other thing I'd like you to see is that you can save any of the reports in this tool directly out to spreadsheet and format them nicely and work with them, combine them with other data. It's all there, and all for the taking relative to taking the data offline and doing further analysis if you so desire. However, our goal here is to give you enough function in the tool itself that you don't really need to do that. So that is the basic benchmark report. Quite a bit of information available just in that report alone. Then we can move to the payer comparison module. And the idea here is that you pick any two payers. For instance, I can pick payer 1 and payer 2 and compare those two payers on a normalized code base based on the primary payer, which is payer 1. So the volumes for payer 1 now are going to be used and applied against the contracted rates of payer 1 and payer 2. And I can now view a report which is going to show the delta revenue or the difference in revenue for each code that reported outcomes in payer 1 and payer 2. And I can add up all the marbles down at the bottom and essentially see that the comparison payer 2 on a normalized volume base using payer 1's volumes is paying about $187K more on a 1.7 mil revenue base than payer 1. And that's very helpful because we get this information not only in total but by code. So we can now do an apples to apples comparison, revenue comparison of our codes and revenue production. Even codes that don't have Medicare rates can be benchmarked. They can be compared to each other. Of course, they can't be benchmarked relative to Medicare, which is why they fell out of this top table. But we can count them and we can look at those same differences. And then we can get a total, grand total delta comparison of the revenue of agreement, the payer comparison agreement against the primary agreement, and see that it's about 80K different on a normalized code base. And there were a few codes that were knocked out because they were missing either primary payer comparison payer rates, therefore they couldn't be included in this apples to apples comparison. And again, the statistical data point, same as you saw in the benchmark report based on the primary payer. So that's the payer comparison module. And then we get to business models. And business models basically are used to do an assessment of your out-of-network analysis and your bill charge analysis. And I want to show you that very quickly. And basically the way this works is that you can take, for example, a payer such as payer 4 in this case, and look at how much revenue this payer makes in-network versus out-of-network based on a set of assumptions which you can control to the left. The assumptions are, for instance, how much business might you lose if you went out-of-network. We chose 30 as a default. What is the administrative overhead? How much more tax might you have on your staff if you have to collect from patients on an out-of-network basis? What percent of your business is entered into the charge master? In other words, I said that you could work with, say, 80 to 90% of your revenue, and therefore, smaller number of codes. Could be as few as 20 to 30 codes out of several hundred. And then your bill charge discount rate, if you typically charge your cash paying patients, give them a 20% benefit, that would be reflected here. And then if we can baseline an agreement with no increase or reflect different increases here. And then you get the punchline over to the right, and then you get the details by code below. So that's the idea of the out-of-network modeler, and what's useful about this is we can change these assumptions and interpolate on the fly. For example, in this case, right now, we are actually better off in an in-network scenario slightly versus an out-of-network. But what if we only lost 10% of our book of business if we went out-of-network? Well, as you would expect, then all of a sudden the out-of-network scenario would be favored versus the in-network. But what if we only lost 10% out-of-network, but we did a 40% discount off our bill charges? What would happen? Well, then again, we go back and we're better off in-network. So you get the point. You can play with these variables to the left, and they affect the outcome on the right. Now, practically speaking, most of the practices and ASCs that I work with, they tend to want to stay in network on larger agreements, which is understandable, although I've seen a few exceptions in those cases as well. But this is very useful, particularly on a mid to smaller sized agreement where you're assessing whether or not you want to move to a non-par status with a particular payer or remain in a non-par status for that matter. And then, last but not least, is our bill charge modeler. And this time I'll just pull up, for a little variety here, the ASC report so you can kind of see what that looks like. But the idea of the bill charge modeler is that you normally would leave 100% in the lesser bill charge or the contracted rate, because what's happening here is that you will get paid the lesser of your bill charge or your contracted rate. And you want to set your bill charges at a high enough threshold that scenario doesn't kick in on you. And if it does, then the tooling below will identify those codes where there's a problem. We use a 5% out-of-network volume against the volumes in this particular payer, so we can quantify the upside benefit that's associated with making charge master adjustments. And then, in this case, it's an ASC. We're going to choose to set our bill charges at 300% of Medicare with a 20% discount. So what happens is, if we look below, any codes that fall below 300% of Medicare, and there's quite a few of them that have volumes reported against them, get identified here in red in the middle, along with the potential upside, and you get told exactly what it would take to get these codes from their current threshold on up to the threshold where they meet your parameter of 300% of bill charges. So, for instance, on code 29820, the recommended bill charge is $9,111.24. The current bill charge is basically set at much lower, $44.19. Therefore, in order to achieve the goal of getting to 300%, you need to adjust the bill charge by $4,693 and so forth. Now, if you had a situation where the bill charge was less than the payer allowable, that would be flagged on the right side, also in red, and that would be a key indicator that you need to adjust those codes up immediately in your billing system because you're getting paid less than the contracted rate. So that gives you a quick tour, folks, through Revolution Software, and want to come back to the fact that this product is meant to assist you in increasing your contract's reimbursement and doing benchmarking so you can understand which agreements are under reimbursed relative to your portfolio of agreements and relative to other outcomes, and is a great tool to assist you in detecting those patterns in your reimbursement that can result in greater upside. I thank you for taking the time out to see this demonstration, and if you would like more information, please also visit us at healthsense.com. And excuse me, and we have a variety of information here about our products and services, and I encourage you to take a look specifically at our blog as well as some of our articles, which I think you will find to be useful in increasing reimbursement. Thank you.